Hi, welcome to the workshop, but not my workshop, this is Brit Parts Workshop. Now the reason I'm here is that the second that the Range Rover chassis is gleaming and ready for parts, I'm going to want to bolt those parts on. Obviously we know we're going to be replacing things like the springs and the shock absorbers, but these axles are going to have to be refurbished before we even think about getting them near a new shiny chassis. So we can't just paint them, we need to actually do a load of checks, make sure there's no wear in any of the moving parts, and obviously we know that the seals are leaking, so they need to be replaced as well. Now to give me a hand, I've got one of Brit Parts experts, Steve.
Hello.
Good to see you, sir. Now, obviously, these are not in terrible state, are they? But I mean, I guess you've probably seen worse. I'm hoping you've seen worse.
I have seen a lot worse, yes. I've seen cases rotted through and that, so these are fairly good for what I've seen so far.
Yeah, well, they hold oil in this area, they just kind of leak it out the edges.
They're leaking out the seals at the moment in various places. As you say, the brakes and that all need looking at and freeing off, so.
Okay, but then I guess the first thing before we can do anything else, really, to check the real important bits of the actual, the diff itself, I guess we want to drop all the oil, right?
Yes, yeah, if we drop the oil out, oil will tell us a multitude of sins for starters, whether there's been mud in there, water in there and whatever.
Chunks of metal, that
Chunks of metal is a bad sign as well, yes.
Now obviously the front is a bit more complicated, so I think we'll just ease ourselves into this by starting on the rear axle. Oh. Right, well, let's have a look. So, right, we're looking at this. You can actually see it's a little bit milky, so there's obviously a tiny bit of moisture in there.
Yeah, there's no water coming out initially, first of all, so that's a good sign.
Yeah,
it's not settled.
And to be fair, John does generally wash this in a Ford after he's been off-roading. I say does, but obviously like 12 years ago. So it's 12-year-old water anyway, for one thing, but also looking at that, just whizzing it around, I can't see any chunks of metal in there either. Which
There's
is
no
also
shiny bits in it at all to suggest any sort of adverse wear and tear. So.
Cool, and it just smells as unpleasant as this gearbox all does anyway, doesn't it?
Always does, yeah. The older it is, the worse it is.
All right, so that's good. So our first stage really is basically the oil's okay, so there's not too much metal in there, then it means that there's a chance that actually that kind of backlash is actually just things, maybe the bearings.
Wear and tear throughout the drivetrain and not just specifically one part.
So the next thing we need to do then is unbolt everything. We'll start taking the half shafts out.
Pull half shafts first and then we can get the diff out the middle without stripping all the hubs down if you wish.
Cool, okay, makes sense. And I think we'll probably take the wheels off for that then, don't we?
We can do, yes.
So we've now got the wheels off, we've got the calipers out of the way, so we can now worry about the half shafts. Now there's 5 screws holding that on, so I'll undo those first of all. Thank you, sir. And then you can actually then draw them out of the axle. Well, this is going to take a bit of a tap, I suppose, is it?
Yeah, a little tap with it.
So here we go. So just pull this out. Well, the first thing is it's in one piece. That's good.
Yes.
Now looking at the splines there, I mean, what are we looking for? A little bit, I suppose, a bit of chattering, a bit of wear, but it actually looks pretty reasonable first up.
Wear.
Oh, there is a little bit just there, isn't there?
Not too bad though, they're very, very good. You've seen them when they're worn off, so.
Okay, so at this stage then, would you think the best thing to do is actually, do we need to replace them, or is this something we can kind of work with? Would you be
We
happy
could work with those, I think.
Yeah? Now, the next bit, actually, the hub nuts there looking very rusty, and there's a little bit of moisture actually on this half shaft, so there's obviously water has been an issue in its life, hasn't
In its pipe, yes,
Yeah.
yeah, there's been something in there.
it? Okay. Upwards and upwards. Or onwards and inwards, actually. Now, Steve, under all this rust should be 2 hub nuts and some kind of locking tab or locking wash, is that right?
Yes, yeah, there's 2 hub nuts with a lock tab in between the 2.
I think we might need a bit more of that action. Thank you, sir. Oh, that's better. So theoretically, if all the seals are working, then there should never be any chance of the water actually getting inside this, should there?
In theory, yeah, if the axle breather's up in the right place and all the seals are working correct.
That's tricky. Okay, well, there we go. So now, with the rust removed, I now need to just knock back the tab off this locking tab here, just move it away from the surface of the nut, because that's obviously what's holding it, stopping it from spinning around. Right, so now our hub nuts are off. We can now actually try and take the rest of the hub off. It's probably going to need a bit of a tap, isn't it, I guess?
I think so, yeah.
So, actually, there we go. Not too bad. Okay. Oh, look at that. Right, pop that down there. Now, first thing, you've got a little spacer here, or whatever, so that's just for the nuts to sit on. So there's a seal at this end, which looks a little bit past it, to be honest.
Depends on model age, there's an outer seal as well as an inner hub seal.
Right, so this one obviously has one of those, so we'll have to replace that
Yep.
as well. And I guess I can't actually get anything to spin. If I spin it over. So there's another seal on this side. That looks even worse than this side. So actually we're going to have at least the 2 seals, and this is the one that's obviously letting the water back in, presumably.
Yes, yeah, that'd be the one letting the water through into the hub if it's going to.
Okay, so we need to change that as well. And theoretically, I suppose we should be able to spin the bearing or something.
We should be able to, yes, but if you can't turn them, that's not a good sign.
It's not a good sign. So obviously, I think because of the moisture, I guess, that's actually been in the axle, then it would make sense, because we're taking everything apart anyway, to change the seals and the bearings, and then that way we know it's going to be good to go back together again. Now, just looking at this stub axle here, now we obviously had a bearing that I couldn't move, and that's because it actually has pretty much seized solid. You can see, I guess, that the water's got in there. It's actually started to pit all the surfaces, and it's just gummed the whole thing up. And actually, you can see the evidence of that on the stub axle itself. So you can see there's discoloration of the metal. It's this kind of nice kind of golden brown colour here, and it actually goes into blue there. And what's happened, of course, as that bearing's been getting hot and seizing, it's actually then transferred that heat to the stub axle, actually changing the surface of the steel and therefore changing the colour. If you go a bit further along, we can actually see the surface here where the seals sort of ride on. That's all pitted and damaged, which means obviously oil can get out, but also water can get back in, which is probably what led to the bearing failing in the first place. So what that means is we're going to be changing the stub axle here, and I might as well do that on the others as well, just to make them all look lovely. Right, well, we know this side needs a bit of work. I'm guessing the other side is much the same, but I suppose we should check that as well, shouldn't we?
Yeah, we'll get the other side to pieces and then we can get the diff out.
Lovely. Right, well, this actually looks slightly better nicked than the other side. There's less rust for a start. Didn't the bearings work? All right, that's
The
better.
bearing seems to work this
Okay.
side compared to the other, yes.
So we've got some working bearings, but still, and a little bit less moisture. But obviously, if we're changing the bearings on one side, we might as well do that on this side. Now, when it actually comes to the half shaft here, again, it's pretty much the same where, if anything, it's slightly better. So I think that
Yeah.
probably it's fair to say that the half shafts are in good nick and we can use those again.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so the next thing we need to worry about is the differential itself. And the first thing, which I think is quite bad,
Quite a bit of
the pinion.
movement in there, yes.
Now, there shouldn't be any movement at all, really. You should really be
No, none at all, no.
imperceptible, because now this is a bit different to modern vehicles where you have a kind of a crush washer, but this has actually just got shims, is that right?
Yes, yeah, the pinion shaft is shimmed to get the preload on the bearings.
So theoretically, if that was correct, then there wouldn't be any movement at all, which means there's something not so good with our bearings.
No, no movement at all, backwards or forwards or left to right.
So then if this is not so great, then of course it means that could there be damage then inside the diff? I mean, obviously then you've got the sort of the teeth of the various gears and things.
Depending on how long it's been like it in use, it's whether it's worn the crown wheel and pinion.
Right, okay, and the only way we're going to find out about that is by getting inside.
Rip it apart.
Here we go again. Should we leave one on?
Yeah, we'll leave that one.
So now we're just, all the bolts are undone. What we need to do is just give it a bit of a tap, I guess, to get it to remove itself a little tiny bit. Maybe you can go a bit more butch than that.
Tapping left to right on the nose.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but there's no risk of damaging it anymore, right?
Okay.
Still it's a bit grippy there, but that's fine. So here we go. So now, this is the whole of the differential. So you've got the pinion, you've actually got the crown wheel, so you've got the panic gears, you've got everything. So it's going to be quite heavy, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Well, in fact, let's move that out of the way, because otherwise we're going to crunch it. I might need to just prise it open just a little bit. Thank you.
Okay.
Now, should we put it onto its side, perhaps so we can see what's going on? Right, well now, at first glance, can't see any sign of any chipped teeth, which is good. And then,
Well, the pinion bearings don't sound nice anyway because there's a lot of play in them.
yeah, so that's really where the problem is. And I guess, so if the teeth are sort of okay, it's actually the bearings that are definitely an issue. But obviously these are quite a complicated bits of gear. I mean, you can see this very strange looking kind of nut on the top. That's actually kind of winds in to hold the bearings in place. And there's this little thing here which actually locks that into position. There's obviously one on either side. Now the thing is, if you were to try and refurbish this at home, you'd need an awful lot of Land Rover sort of specialist tools, and particularly the main thing would be the kind of the block that supports everything, so you can actually get the height of the pinion in the right place.
Yeah, yeah.
So
set
if you
back
haven't
up.
got any of those, I guess that's going to set you back a fair few quid, or you're going to have to borrow them.
And guessing again might cause the diff to fail as well.
Well, that's
And
true if you don't get it
If you
right.
don't get it right, then it's either going to be noisy
Yeah.
or
Or
say a
not
lot of
work
tolerance.
eventually. Yeah, that's very true. And I suppose to get someone else to refurbish it, it's probably going to cost you maybe £400 or so. But you guys actually do a brand new one.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do a complete reassembled unit, so off the shelf. So literally, you can put it in, rebuild the axle, put the oils in, and away to go.
That's brilliant. And of course, then you have the peace of mind that it's been set up exactly the way it should be, well, so with no sloppiness, shall we say, like we have here. So that's possibly the way to go with this back axle. So now we should have a little look at the front axle, see how things are going there. Right, so this is our front axle, and it's pretty much identical to the rear axle, except for these swivel joints at either end. Of course, that's how you go around corners, that's how you steer, and you've got a CV joint kind of right in the middle of this sphere. Now, you can see it hasn't actually got any protection on there, but that's actually as it is from factory, isn't it? That's how it's
Yes,
supposed
it
to
is.
be.
Yeah.
So obviously the problem is that when the seals start to wear away, when sand and grit get in there, of course, as you can see, there's all kinds of oil beginning to leak out, and that's obviously less than ideal. But while it's all still in one piece, something else that's worth talking about is that there's this bearing at the top and the bottom, and basically that swivel action, if you like, that's the kingpin inclination, and that's basically what defines your caster angle, isn't it? So that's effectively what helps control or bring you back to straight when you're going around a corner. Now, John has actually fitted a 2-inch lift kit to his vehicle, which effectively pushes the axles down away from the bodywork. But because of this hockey stick, this lump of suspension here, as it's being pushed down to get a bit more height, of course, it's also changing the angle or the orientation of the axle. And therefore, it's also changing that inclination, which means you lose a little bit of caster. So one thing we need to think about in the future is perhaps uprating those so we can actually, because you do like a corrective version.
caster, yes, on the hockey sticks.
So it adds about, what, 3 degrees or
About
something?
3
like?
degrees, yeah.
So that way, hopefully then John's handling is going to be much better on the road, on the way to the off-road adventure. But anyway, enough of that. Let's crack on with taking this apart. So essentially, it's much the same as the other side, but you've got, rather than a half shaft there, that's here, is that right?
Yes,
and then
yeah.
Your CV joint, and then you've got what?
A stub shaft.
A stub shaft, right? Okay, we've got a stub shaft at the edge there, and so we're going to have to take it all apart again. So it's the same bolts on there, and then slowly remove it, and so we can see the condition of everything inside. Right then, well, looking at our little stub shaft here, so the spline is basically the same sort of thing we had on the half shaft on the rear, and you can see there's just a little bit of wear, just like before, but nothing too serious, so we can definitely use this again, so that's great. So now, the next bit is to take off the rest of this hub. So again, as before, we have these 2 nuts and the washer. Right, so now, I can maybe tease this off again. A little bit of persuasion. Right, so, now again, much the same sort of story as on the rear end there. We've got the seals are clearly not actually stopping the oil leaving, so that's good. We're going to have to change all those bearings. Ooh. Actually, not quite as bad as the back. I haven't seized, that's for sure. But again, it would be worth changing those as well. So now, the next thing you need to do is actually start to try and separate this swivel joint here. Right, so get rid of that. And then we actually get to our CV joint, which is in here. There we go. So this actually looks in pretty good order. Main thing to do is just check the cage for any cracks. So everything's looking pretty reasonable, and it's actually quite tight, which is good. Now, this is an earlier model of Range Rover. On the later ones, they actually have that stub shaft attached to the CV joint, which is then in turn actually attached to the half shaft, so it will all come out in one go. So in a weird way, this is slightly easier to deal with. Right, with that out of the way, the next thing is to now undo the back of this. I can get it off the swivel joint. So last screw there, then this little metal kind of plate comes off. And then you can see just about, there is, underneath all this muck, actually a seal. So what I need to do is actually get that seal out. Obviously it's not really doing a great job anyway, because you can see there's oil everywhere. So what I'm going to try and do, without damaging it too far, or too much, I'm just going to tap that in. Try that again. There we go, so that's the seal removed. So the only thing that's actually holding the swivel housing onto the inside of the swivel joint is actually the bearings going top and bottom, and thankfully I can just undo just the top one and bottom, so I'm just going to have to just fold that flat here. This little locking tab goes onto that bolt, and then we should be able to undo those and then remove the bearing. Right, there we go. So that is the pin, and the bearing actually sits on top of that. So now we should be able to lever the housing over. So you're revealing the bearing, it drops off the bottom. So you can see, obviously one bearing's there, the other one is actually going in to the top. So we're now actually into our swivel, which doesn't look terrible, it's got to be said. When the bearings have got a little bit of pitting on, again, seen better days. Easy enough bits to replace as well. So another thing to the list. So the last part now is our half shaft. Look at that. And so again, looking here, so looking at this at our half shaft, again, same sort of story. There's a little tiny bit of wear, but it really isn't that bad after 100,000 miles. So I think we'll keep that one as well. Right then, so the last thing to undo is actually our swivel joint itself. Now these are normally Loctited in, so it's a little bit tighter than it might be, but it's okay. So it does come apart reasonably well. I guess it's because of all the leaks. There's oil everywhere, so all the threads aren't actually seized in, so that's kind of handy. So a few of these to do, and then we're nearly there. Now while I wrestle with these screws, actually what's interesting is you can see that this coating here is actually chrome plated. Obviously it's nice and hard and it kind of resists quite a bit of wear, but it's obviously not very good for the environment. So sort of after about 2012 or so, they started using a nitrate finish. It was kind of like a black finish, and that is obviously slightly better for the environment, so you can actually age the vehicle, or certainly age the swivel joint, by what colour it is. Okay, so now a little tap, hopefully. There we are. So now that is a swivel joint, you can see right there. Now, first of all, you can actually see there's an inclination that way, so actually it gets to the kind of the centre of the contact patch of the tyre, so that actually stops any kind of weirdness in handling that way. But also, if you can imagine, then depending on the orientation of the axle, also depends on the caster angle, which is why we have to compensate for that lift kit. Now, I'll just remove the seals and that little plate. Now, Steve, I can see some pitting here, so that doesn't look great, does it? So I guess the chrome's actually coming away.
Starting to go, isn't it? That's actually inside the seal, so there's been water in the oil, which has been causing that.
And of course, once you've got that run of rough surface, then the seal's going to get snagged. It's going to let more moisture in and more oil out.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we need a new one of those as well.
Yep.
Do you do a kit for this?
Yes, there's a swivel kit, yes.
Brilliant. That's very, very handy, isn't it? So there we go. So it looks like, as far as the swivel joints are concerned, we may well end up replacing both of those, but actually the half shafts are okay and the stub shafts are all right, as the CV joint seems to be as well. So that's all good. So the last thing we need to worry about on this thing, of course, is our differential again. So on this end, I mean, like the Oh, it's quite a lot of backlash. There's more, I would say,
More
the front.
backlash than that one feels than on the other one.
And there's a little bit of movement as well, sort of fore and aft. Not as much as on the rear, but it can't be great. But also it seems to change depending on where you are, which means, does that mean something's bent?
Might be something within the taper roller on the bearing, but I wouldn't have thought you'd bend a pinion shaft.
You'd have to be going some, wouldn't you, really?
You'd break it first before it bend.
Okay,
Yeah,
but it's not a
shear.
great thing. So yes, I suppose we should undo this and have another look and just see what the inside of our diff looks like, and then I think we know pretty much where we are with our axles. Yep.
It should just roll now.
Oh, look at that. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Right, so just 10 more bolts to undo, and then we'll know what's going on the inside. Right then. Hopefully no oil's going to leak out of this as we're doing it vertically, but we might have a little bit, might we? Right then, so this is quite heavy. So here we go again. It's all that quality iron, isn't it? Let's have a little look. Right, so. Oh no. There's quite a lot of movement there. Well, so again, looks a bit like the rear axle. I can't see any broken teeth. I guess it looks all right inside here. But there's a lot of backlash.
There's a lot more backlash in this one, I think, than the front.
And I suppose, again, I mean, obviously because of that play, you're going to have to take it all apart.
You'll take it all
Rebuild
apart.
it, reshim it.
Yeah, redo the pinion bearings again in this one, because this one, there's really play in the bearings, and
Yeah.
it seems to has that tight spot as well, so we've got to investigate the tight spot.
So probably it's, again, nice and easy just to use a Britpart part. Well, that was quite a job, but thanks to Steve's help, we now know which part of our original axles need to be discarded and which can be salvaged. So the next part of the process is to get the casings, which we are going to keep, shot blasted and then powder coated so they look as good as new. So I'm going to leave those with Steve, but I'm not going to leave empty-handed, because I also can now take away with me things like the bearings, the seals, brakes, differentials, all the other stuff we need to build up those axles so they're good and ready to go onto the chassis. And clearly, that's going to be quite a bit of work. So it's a job for another day and a job for back at the workshop.